Thank you.
Taking this to Professor Singh now, persons of Indian origin, there are about 3.18 million, which actually constitutes the third largest Asian ethnic group in US. And poll-bound America, and you have this diaspora event, which, I mean, if you look back from 2014 to 2024, the way these diaspora events have been curated and they form such an integral part of Prime Minister's visit, particularly to United States of America. So, by and large, Professor Singh, what do you have to say about particular significance of this particular diaspora event, given the timings of it? Diaspora is a very, very important constituency out there. And from that prism, how do you see this?
I think, Saril, each emerging new power has to rewrite several ways international politics and international relations are conducted, and has to bring out innovative and very effective way its leverages are going to work. So when it comes to India, our people are strongest leverage that India has never in history of international relations. We have seen any national leader visiting a foreign country and holding as large gatherings as Indian Prime Minister does now, starting from day one of his becoming the Prime Minister of the country. And that is an entirely new way of projecting India and creating pro-India, India-friendly constituencies around the world, not just in India. And because India, as Ambassador just mentioned, is rising very rapidly as an economic power, already third largest, likely to be soon third largest, already fifth largest, soon to be third largest, growing at 8%, also makes all other interlocutors around the world more excited about engaging India, partnering India, and working with India. And the third point, I think, which is a really fantastic addition, is our very articulate Prime Minister who connects with people, like no one else. And he can connect with people wherever he goes. And that creates a whole new enthusiasm about looking at India, engaging India, and engaging India's leaders. So this visit, in a very brief, if you look at, had an engagement at the apex level of political leadership in Quad meeting, where in that sense was a farewell Quad meeting for President Biden, who's been very powerful leader in institutionalizing Quad. Then, of course, his meetings with, round table with CEOs, inviting them to come and take India as an opportunity. And then, of course, also this meeting with Diaspora, meeting everyone who has, any connection with India, either citizens of India or people of Indian ethnic origin. Then, of course, with that fantastic backdrop is when he goes to the General Assembly to address Summit of the Future, with enormous attention already now drawn in media around the world as to Indian Prime Minister being in New York, and then his vision as to what he thinks India can bring to the table in resolving issues of the future.
Yeah,
I think it's a fantastic way we are kind of leapfrogging, pushing India story forward. And in that meeting with Indian diaspora, highlighting culture, tradition, connectivity, all the way connecting to the most modern advanced manufacturing technology, aspiring India, America, India, all kinds of narratives are being brought to the table, which fundamentally draws global attention to the new India story. I think that is where Prime Minister's visit and connection with diaspora, I think, is a very effective way of conducting diplomacy.
Yes, that's a very important point that you brought it. And as we stay with these file shots, Professor Singh, it can't get bigger than this.
Indeed, Saril, of course, I must also underline that while we often mention and note the bigger gatherings more often, it's also equally important to underline Indian Prime Minister doesn't miss this opportunity wherever he goes, even to smaller countries. For example, Papua New Guinea, or more recently, let's say, he was in Poland, he was in Ukraine. Also, that connect with the people of Indian diaspora is a very important priority for his visits. And that is bringing a whole new self-confidence in the identity that Indians abroad have. For example, recently in Ukraine, because of India's, decision not to condemn Russia, there are about 2,500 Indians who permanently live in Ukraine, had become more or less target of a lot of criticism domestically. And when Indian Prime Minister went there, he visited and he met Indians of Indian diaspora. He played floral tribute to Mahatma Gandhi's statue there. the whole relationship of the Ukrainians with those Indian people of Indian origin changed.
Yes.
So the confidence and pride in that identity of being an Indian, which again, Prime Minister keep talking of getting rid of colonial mindset.
Right.
And taking pride in your heritage. And I think that is across the world in all his visits.
Right.
And
Yes.
that shows his conviction in showcasing the connection India has around the world.
And having said that, Professor Singh, India's sway and influence at the Quad, that India is now in a position to give a fresh framework where Quad grouping is or will not be just confined to addressing a very, pressing military issue or, how you contain China. Well, it seems that this combine of India-US, it's going to be a new framework, a new vision with India leading the way.
Already, Saril, a lot of experts speak about how Quad has a very unique and special India imprint on it. Because starting with the Shangri-La speech of Indian Prime Minister in June 1st of 2018, where Prime Minister had defined India's Indo-Pacific vision, saying we don't want to see the region militarized, and we do not want to see the region becoming an exclusive club of any few nations. Indeed, many people believe that because India stood firmly that they don't want to see Quad militarizing, which of course during President Trump's period, Pompeo used to often speak about in that language, they had to create a separate AUKUS, Australia, US, UK framework, which looks at military power projections vis-a-vis Chinese, and a whole range of working groups, 6 working groups, which now Quad leaders have. At best, talk about non-traditional security. That's one. So already there is a strong opinion of India imprint on Quad. Second very important point to look at this particular Quad summit is that President Joe Biden, who's known as the force behind institutionalizing of Quad, you remember, he, within 2 months of taking over presidency in 2021, had started with online summit and followed in September of 2021 offline in-person summit meeting. And they have held 4 summit meetings since then and 8 foreign ministers meetings. So US has been institutionalizing Quad. But remember, Joe Biden is now on his way to complete his term, and we will still have to see who is the next president in the United States, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Similarly, Japanese leader also, Fumio Kishida, is already decided that he's stepping down. He's not looking for re-election. Shinzo Abe was the strongest voice from Japan for Quad, and of course, over time, Fumio Kishida had stepped in and taken responsibility. But again, we don't know who is the next leader. So that puts enormous onus then on Indian leadership of Quad, if I dare say that, to continuously keep that momentum that Quad has built over a period of time. So in that sense, I think India has a very specific responsibility, at least during the transition. And I want to underline the fact that during 2000 to 2007, when the Quad ultimately went in a dormant state, virtually sleeping for a decade, one trigger was the change of leadership in Australia and Japan. So it could be a similar, very, very precarious moment of new leaders emerging in Japan and the United States.
Okay.
United States and Japan will take some time to gear up, and India will provide that continuity in that sense in taking forward Quad momentum.
Okay, Professor Singh, look at the recent visits of Prime Minister, and you've got Russia, Ukraine, Brunei, then you have Austria, and then you have Singapore, and then US. In that perspective, how do you see this visit?
I think, Saril, first of all, India has always been a very powerful voice for peacemaking, peace building, peacekeeping. In fact, throughout India's post-independence period or history, a very important contributor to UN peacekeeping from late 1950s onwards. And now, more recently, of course, we are noticing a very subtle, very modest, behind the closed doors, India's efforts to accelerate the peace process when it comes to resolving the Ukraine crisis is also becoming more and more talk of town now. But when it comes to India-US relationships, I think it is important to underline that the friendship and the partnership has very strong bipartisan consensus in the United States. So one can only pinpoint as into each presidency what was the kind of ground shaking or game changing kind of initiative that happened. For example, during Trump period, we can see how the whole focus on Indo-Pacific brought India into that major game-changing initiatives and creating of Quad again, becoming a driver of how stability, security, and free and open Indo-Pacific has to be maintained. During the Joe Biden period, I think one can pinpoint, I will say, ISET, for example, initiative in critical and emerging technologies, which has a whole spectrum of working together in strategic cooperation, from startups to military cooperation, military joint production
Right.
exchanges. So a whole range of things have happened. But let me also underline, there was also this recent period of pandemic when, whole world was under stress, and that did impact that, they could have moved much forward, much faster. And that really decelerates slightly the kind of progression that could have been possible in India-US relations. But we are back into action now. I think momentum is taking up, and we can notice.
And in that momentum, sir, if I may quickly ask from both of you, role of diaspora to take it to next level. How do you see that? The Prime Minister himself hailed their role yesterday in his address.
Clearly, I think diaspora, if you look at different countries have different kinds of diaspora. Indian diaspora is very heavy on capacity and skill building that they showcase. So they are doctors, professors, scientists, technicians. That means that they are middle class, upper middle class, and very aspirational group of people who are very active. So you can see their visibility in politics. You can see their visibility in arts and aesthetics. You can see their visibility in business and corporations. So they are fast-moving diaspora in United States compared to several other diaspora that we see in United States. And with the aspirational India, that connection, I think, is going to be mutually beneficial in taking forward the relationship. And that is why this pride that Indians now showcase and feel of their identity being Indians is very clearly visible in the also new confidence that India has. And that's why I keep saying that bridge building between Indian, diaspora around the world is creating India-friendly and pro-India constituencies, which is going to catapult India's story much faster around the world. It's easier to connect for India today because we have enormous 24, 26 million people around the world who now are increasingly getting very confident, very proud of connecting with their motherland or of their connection. And I think that is going to be mutually beneficial. In fact, that is how you see now we are opening 2 more consulates in Boston and Los Angeles.
Right.
That means activity of connectivity is really expanding.
So this largest diaspora in the world with an over 35 million people, at least 35 million people residing outside India. Professor Singh, your take?
I think tomorrow, as Indian Prime Minister addresses the Summit of Future, the absence of President Putin and President Xi Jinping is going to bring enormous limelight on what India's leader has to give to the world and how India sees what are the challenges and how India wants to resolve those global challenges in future. And I think that is something that has already, the groundswell has already been created during the Quad meeting, during meeting with diaspora and with the CEOs, roundtable of CEOs. And you heard Indian Prime Minister saying that he wants to see made in India semiconductor chips being used in the United States. So enormous upsurge in enthusiasm of young India, and you mentioned India being a young country as well. That is making India equally very attractive to several countries around the world, including United States.
And at the core of the summit, I think we really need to touch upon this as well, the fact that it outlines to make United Nations Security Council, more effective, India's candidature in terms of India's candidature, reforming of UNSC is something we have been talking about. And I think it is now the time, Professor Singh. Now is the time for India.
I absolutely agree with you, Sakal. India has already been 8 times non-permanent member sitting in UN Security Council. That shows enormous credibility that India has in sitting on that high table. And I think now I talk in a very different way. I argue that it's the time now when it is not the credibility of India which is in question. It is now the credibility of UN Security Council.
Yes.
If they do not have India as a permanent member with a veto as one among them, then I think the issue is now more about UN Security Council's credibility rather than India's credibility. And India goes there, in the future summit tomorrow with enormous credentials of International Solar Alliance, International Biofuels Coalition, all sort of other initiatives recently in peace, accelerating peace process in Ukraine, and of course a whole lot of other things that India is doing now, fourth largest in terms of unicorns in India. So in that sense, I think India's visibility tomorrow, and I did underline the fact that President Putin and President Xi Jinping are not there, which brings enormous focus on what leader of India is going to speak tomorrow in the future summit and what compact for the future they're going to sign. And I think that is making India really very effective and very attractive for the rest of the world to engage. And since India already has said we are looking at 2047 as a target for Viksit Bharat, that means we're already looking at how India's future is connected to global futures. And if global stability, peace, prosperity, as Prime Minister keeps saying, is ensured, India's prosperity is also ensured, or reverse argument would be that if 1.4 billion people on the planet, which are in India, are given stability, prosperity and good life, part of the planet already is prosperous, happy and stable in that sense. But the connectivity of India trying to ensure global prosperity and peace, and seeing India's prosperity is peace in that larger canvas, is being repeatedly underlined. And I think the world understands India's vision increasingly, that India is committed to what India says.
That reminds me, Honorable Prime Minister's opening line yesterday, that Namaste has become international, Namaste has become global. And I think we're really waiting what really India brings to the summit table today. And day 3, it's the event which takes the center stage. We on DD India will continue our rolling coverage on Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States of America. Meanwhile, thank you very much, Ambassador Baswati and Professor Singh. It was such a pleasure talking to both of you on this special broadcast. Namaste. Thank you.